Disclaimer: the following video can contain spoilers. When electrical anomalies turn out to be a psychic energy SOS from Hollow Earth, a team led by Dr. Eileen Andrews, Rebecca Hall, travel to Hollow Earth to investigate, encountering an uncharted territory. There, they uncover both the rich history on Kong's species and more of his kind. Among them, their leader, Skar King, whose goal to reach the surface seems closer than ever. I have come to a fork in the road. One path is about a well-constructed narrative, portrayed through what many claim to be cinema. On the other side is an enjoyable popcorn flick. There are multiple bumps in the road in both, but comparing one road to the other seems very counterintuitive. However, I can at least talk about the journey in itself, right? That being the story, which is always great to understand and appreciate within a movie. I, however, also noticed that my reviews have been more critical towards the movies I find errors or flaws in, whereas movies I enjoy tend to be shorter and not much in depth as I'd hope. I hope to change that in the future, but for now, bear with me as I continue on this journey of reviewing and finding my rhythm. For this review, I want to talk about how, even in a popcorn flick, story matters, and how adding convenience to a story can lead to a separation between viewers, even though the popcorn flick's spectacle elements to it is arguably enjoyable. This movie continues with the MonsterVerse universe. With its similar structure to previous movies, it is an enjoyable popcorn flick. It has some good action and fight scenes that leave you excited. And, at least for me, A New Empire also brought comedic elements into several of its fights, which made the viewing more enjoyable, whether or not it was intentional. It's the type of movie where I feel action, spectacle, and CGI goes above storytelling to just bring out an entertaining viewing that you enjoy watching from beginning to end. Without much thought into certain directions or actions, the story takes its characters and thus the audience through this journey. That, although enjoyable, it was only achieved through simplicity or convenience that sometimes creates less of an impact in its story.
Looks bad. Shit.
That's worse than bad. That's frostbite.
Lucky for us, the prototype had already been transported to Hollow Earth for testing.
Look, I always look at story, whether it be cinema, a popcorn flick, or anything in between. But with that out of the way, let's continue. The story opens up in Hollow Earth, specifically in Kong's hunting ground. Being chased by these wolf-like creatures, Kong outsmarts them by using traps, unbeknownst to him that one of these traps will be a sort of gateway to uncharted territory. Meanwhile, on Earth, Gia, Kaylee Hutt, begins having weird visions, which would later on be discovered hold similarities to these electrical anomalies Dr. Eileen Andrews' team keeps experiencing. Unable to determine anything, she goes on to ask Bernie Hayes, Brian Tyree Henry, for help. Bernie informs Dr. Andrews that these anomalies are actually some sort of psychological SOS being transmitted from Hollow Earth. Not wanting the government to pull the plug on them and take over, the team hopes that through this investigation they can tell the government why Godzilla is on the move, hoping it would allow them to keep the program going. Both the human team and Kong separately investigate this uncharted territory where they will soon find Skar King, an evil ape whose goal to reach the surface and dominate the world can now be achieved because of the actions performed by our heroes. Now that we got a brief summary of the movie, let me discuss how even though a movie that is made purely for entertainment's sake, being a popcorn flick and all, story still matters. For that, let's remove the spectacle aspect to the movie and just focus on the story. You'll then start to notice that this movie's structure resembles a convenient conveyor belt, where the story moves along from point A to point B in a linear path, oftentimes the easiest and most convenient way possible.
They believe that their savior will be an Iwi from Skull Island.
It sounds weird, yes, I know, and I've no doubt I butchered my explanation to it. But I hope you understood what I was trying to say. I will also talk about some parts that actually were pretty well written too, in my opinion. Essentially, the story wasn't altogether bad, it was just how they chose to overcome hurdles with convenience that was bad. The opening was well written and effective in the form of giving us a lot of setups and information that would be touched upon later on in the movie. Kong's hunting grounds, his tooth decay, him being the last of his kind, wanting to find a family of his own, etc., etc. It was a nice, short, and overall decent way to begin the movie. With some somewhat clever ways to give us exposition through scenes, we do get the necessary building blocks per se needed in understanding the world, characters, but most importantly, story, its tone, and direction. So as mentioned in the summary, Kong's actions within his hunting grounds that uncovers uncharted territory was not badly written because 1. It was his own actions that would lead him into going towards a new world, or Act 2A if you will. 2. We see how Kong's hunting ground works, so when this scene comes up, it works as well. Because we were already shown and established how his hunting grounds works, how he has traps set up, essentially. A short but nice setup payoff, if you will. 3. It leads to Kong's tooth decay and feelings of isolation that would play a part later on. Of course, it's only after the opening when I do start to get critical because of how the story progresses through this metaphorical conveyor belt. Let's start with Kong's tooth decay. Although we do get to see Kong's tooth rotting, causing a toothache, this hurdle was jumped over rather quickly. With the introduction of our adventurous veterinarian, trapper, Dan Stevens, replaces it with a polymer composite that they conveniently had. And before I continue, I do want to say that yes, even though most of what I will talk about does have some sort of justification and or explanation to these actions that would help our heroes jump these hurdles, I'm mainly talking about how convenient things got that allowed our heroes to jump over the hurdles, not the hurdles or the acts of jumping over them. Get it? Okay. Let me put it this way. Kong's tooth is in need of replacing. That's a hurdle. Replacing the tooth is how this hurdle is jumped. But not only that, it's how the story progresses with this new information, event, or action. When Skar King notices the tooth, I could have sworn he would have the understanding that this ape has been to the surface, that these humans he so wants to be superior to have replaced his tooth, causing him to demand answers from Kong, or change his demeanor. But instead, he just laughs at him, and the story continues. Although we do get to see how vile and villainous he is, if he doesn't make a small indication to put the two pieces together, it kind of makes getting a new tooth obsolete. Kong doesn't even use it to chomp something relevant to the story. Not even after Trapper says he can chew through the Eiffel Tower with that thing. Sure, it gives weight to certain things like having the funds/equipment to create advancements for these titans like a tooth, and later on the gauntlet, but either way, it was a hurdle that was jumped over in a convenient way that later on doesn't play a part to the story, making this hurdle feel unrelated to the plot.
The tooth? Yeah, that's the same polymer composite they use on the vehicle heat shields. You could chomp through the Eiffel Tower, don't you?
And since I mentioned it, let me segue into the gauntlet. Similarly, when Kong gets frostbite on his hand, the team gives him a gauntlet. And while again they do have some justification for it, it was convenient that not only was the gauntlet near them, but using some green liquid within the gauntlet allowed Kong's frostbite to heal. So again, another hurdle jumped with ease that even though it has its justifications, the act of jumping over these hurdles was disappointing. If you don't think about it and just see your items, or in this case the movie, move along the conveyor belt without stopping, you can enjoy the ride. But there should be more to it than that. Where's the conflict, both internal and external? The pieces are there, but not completely, because they were never allowed to grow because of how convenient these hurdles were. If you don't allow our heroes to face these hurdles, you prevent them from changing, and worst of all, allowing these events to affect their new way of thinking. A New Empire doesn't have this at all, and while it was entertaining to see, it does hurt me seeing how they dealt with the technical side to the story. I think the biggest convenience the movie had was with Gia's character. As the movie explains it, there is an Iwi tribe hidden down in Hollow Earth who were sending these SOS signals, causing Godzilla to do side quests, leveling up for imminent danger that somehow the hidden Iwi tribe can sense approaching.
So wait, they send out this SOS, and then what? Godzilla hears it?
They woke him up.
While Kong gets closer to getting what he wants, with a slight complication, the team finds a history between the Titans, where only by fighting alongside Godzilla can Kong defeat Skar. So in order for Godzilla to be on board and not fight Kong like we've seen multiple times, Mothra needs to be resummoned. However, she can only be summoned by an Iwi tribe from Skull Island. But wouldn't you know it, Gia is there to solve all of these problems. Not only was I disappointed at its convenience, I questioned what exactly was the connection between Skull Island and Mothra. Perhaps it's something I've forgotten from the earlier movies, but I'm uncertain. But the way she was summoned was also kind of disappointing because all Gia did was raise one of her hands and poof, Mothra was summoned. And I also have to mention how convenient it was that they found the tribe by somehow pushing this rock that a dragonfly just landed on. How convenient it was to have Godzilla power up on the site to team up with Kong. Sure, he understood the Iwi tribe's SOS and he sided with Kong because of Mothra, but still. You have hurdles that are jumped with ease. Even though technically speaking all of these events had weight to it justifying it further, I can't help but see how easily these hurdles were jumped over, removing much of the conflict these characters face. Instead, the conflict comes from Skar King. And yes, that was pretty darn great, but the story aspect failed as a result, at least in terms of conflict because, yeah, I will say that aside from the conflict hurdle jumping problem it has, the story was good. Don't get me wrong, a lot of the spectacle and actions were really entertaining in this movie that maybe, just maybe, I can overlook its simplicity and convenient resolution of conflicts to say it was a fun and decent movie. Overall, this movie did have its moments, of which I enjoyed. Following Kong in this new uncharted territory was really fun and great. The battle between Kong and Skar was also great. Skar King himself was also great. Godzilla was, well, Godzilla, which was great. But the problem lies within its story. I'm mainly talking about the technical aspect of hurdle jumping, where there weren't many true conflicts that help our characters grow from challenges that affect them in a deep and internal way. So again, the movie was enjoyable. It's just me overlooking this enjoyment to see how convenient these hurdles were jumped over. But anyways, those are just my thoughts. Did you enjoy the movie? Let me know what you thought about it down below, and I'll see you in the next review. Until then, God bless.